Hey. Okay, hi. Can everybody hear me all right? Wonderful. So I'm Ellen Bertels. I am the attorney who runs the Kansas Name Change Project at Kansas Legal Services, where for the last almost 2 years, I have been representing trans folks, primarily low-income trans folks, in name changes, gender markers, and frankly, whatever civil legal issue came up that I had the capacity to deal with at the time. So I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about gender markers in Kansas. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our community standards portion of the event to kind of talk about what you can expect. If you have folks who are still coming in, if you know a friend is still on their way, or someone is like a couple minutes late hopping onto the Zoom, that is okay. We will have time at the end for Q&A and to sort of get folks up to speed. And also, I'm going to be chatting at you a little bit about what to expect before we get there. So they've got about 5 or so minutes before we really get into the nitty gritty. So to get things kicking, first off, before I do that, like I said, my name is Ellen. I use she, her pronouns. If you just want to throw your hand up and be like, Ellen, if I'm not paying attention to you at any point during this and you have an urgent question, please feel free to do so. I've done a bunch of these, so I will say I try to work in the most commonly asked questions into the presentation. So if you feel like, oh man, she's not getting to something that seems essential, give me like 5 minutes. And if I'm still not to it, then throw your hand up. But know that I have done a boatload of these and I try to be as thorough as possible. I also want to say a quick thank you to my many, many fantastic volunteer attorneys and non-attorneys that I have tonight. A lot of the folks at the back of the room on those gray tables are here to help us get through this clinic tonight, and specifically here to help you with potential one-on-one questions that you may have after the presentation. So if your situation is not reflected in the presentation, if there's facts about your life that don't seem like they make sense with what I'm talking about, there are attorneys in the back of the room who are going to have a chance to speak with you once the presentation is done. And I just want to say a huge, enormous thank you to those attorneys and law students and law interns who are here helping us, because we would not be able to get it done without them. And also to Mary, who put stamps on my envelopes, because she's the best. Okay, so I'm going to get into community standards, sort of what to expect about tonight, and a quick explanation of anything that you might feel is missing from our conversation. And I guess I'll begin by talking about the agenda. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is SB 180, which is the bill that most likely brings everyone into the room tonight. I'm going to give you sort of an overview of what we know and what we do not know about that bill and how it affects your legal rights currently. Then I'm going to talk about adult birth certificate gender marker changes, minor birth certificate gender marker changes, and driver's licenses / IDs. I'm going to say driver's licenses from here forward, but I want you to know that what I'm talking about is any state issued ID that goes like this or goes like this, regardless of whether you have driving privileges attached to it. So due to disability, inability to drive, age, or having your license suspended or restricted, you may not have access to driving privileges. The law is the same for folks who can drive and who cannot drive who have those IDs. So I'm going to say driver's licenses, but just know it includes y'all too, if that applies to you. So next, I want to talk about expectations. So the first thing is everything I discussed tonight. I mean, there's going to be some things I talk about that are not necessarily like in the packet, but most of what I talk about and basically all the information you need to do a gender marker change in Kansas is in the packets that KLS has published about birth certificate changes and about driver's license changes. So if you're here in person with us and you have not picked up a physical copy of one of those packets, we have them at those tables at the back of the room, and you're welcome to get up now or at any point during the presentation and grab one. And if you want to take one home to a friend or a loved one, we should probably have extras. As long as there's extras, you can take one. That's my promise to you. I can't promise more than that. They're also available online. So the exact packets that I have here tonight are available online at Kansas Legal Services website. So if you genuinely Google, I don't have them linked on my computer. I Google them every single time, partially because it gets us better like numbers on our Google logistics. But if you Google Kansas Legal Services gender marker change driver's license, it will come up, or even Kansas gender marker change driver's license, it will come up as like the second thing. So know that those are available even after you leave tonight. We do not have to do like the scarcity rush thing where we all get 15, because those are publicly available. Also, just so everyone knows what to expect, we will not be talking about name changes tonight. This is not because I don't think name changes are important. My job is the name change project. It's because your right to a name change is not at risk currently if you are a resident of Kansas. SB 180 affects your right to a gender marker. It could affect any other number of things about your life, but it does not affect your ability to change your name now or after July 1st. And there's no pending legislation that would affect that ability. So the only reason that we are not talking about that, and I'm not going to necessarily be able to advise you on that at this moment, is because we're trying to do triage care as lawyers right now, as like trans friends lawyers. We're doing emergency room care. So that means, where is it bleeding? How do we stop the bleeding? And right now the bleeding, at least for those of us who know a lot about gender markers, is Kansas gender markers. We're also not going to talk about other states' ID corrections. Partially, this is because I am a lawyer licensed in Kansas and only Kansas, meaning that I cannot dissect the laws of other states for you, and often trying to figure out a gender marker for another state requires me to do so. It's also because there's probably like 45 of you, and you could be from 45 different states, and that would keep us here until midnight, and the library would be very mad at me for that. So what I can do, if you tell me what state you're from, is guide you to a resource that can tell you a little bit more about the process in that state. And we will talk a little bit about whether that would apply to your situation or not. But I'm not going to like necessarily do group questions about other states. And just know that everything I'm talking about tonight applies to Kansas only. And then finally, I know this is the burning question. It has been for weeks. I'm not going to talk to you about potential lawsuits against SB 180. And I know that is a huge bummer, and I wish that I could as well. But there's a couple reasons that I'm not able to talk about this. First off is that there are lawyers who sue the government, and that there are lawyers who do not sue the government. And currently, I'm one of the lawyers who does not sue the government. So I am not the expert on the decisions right now that are being made about when, where, and how to challenge SB 180 constitutionally. Another one of those things is that part of the process of suing the government can be a very complex process that changes minute to minute and hour to hour. So even if I did have insight on that, I wouldn't be able to like provide you with useful, helpful insight. I think what I can say very fairly is that there are a lot of smart, diligent, dedicated advocates who love trans Kansans, who know how you feel about this bill. Often many of them are feeling the exact same way because they are trans, and those folks are thinking hard about what this bill does for trans Kansans, and they're thinking hard about ways that they can make life for folks ways that they can make life better for folks on the ground right now. But I'm not gonna be able to say more than that. And then the next thing I want to go to, just really quickly, is community standards. So things that we can agree to as a group, I think pretty readily, to set expectations for how we communicate with one another. So the first thing is a lesson I really like from a mentor of mine. Lessons leave and stories stay. So when we have a Q&A later, right, folks may be asking questions that relate to the specific facts of their life, and it might require them either in the group or individually to talk about the private details of their lives. Those details stay in the room. They do not leave with them. We do not take them out, right? Because we are all here assuming that we have agreed to a certain amount of privacy and respect for each other's privacy. And so to maintain that, I ask that we maintain that privacy. We leave the facts of people's lives here. But if you learn something, right, if you learn, oh, if you're born in Missouri, then this is how you manage this, you can take that lesson, or you can take that lesson with you when you go tonight. So the lessons can leave with you, the story should stay. The second thing is that I am not your lawyer, and I should have put an asterisk here. I meant to. None of the lawyers in this room are your lawyer for the purposes of this evening, and none of the information we're conveying to you is legal advice. So we are here on a primarily educational, informational basis. We are trying to help as many people as we can, but by providing this information and education to you tonight, we're not beginning, I know lawyer textbook stuff, but we are not beginning a lawyer-client relationship, and unless you go through an intake and agree to some sort of representation agreement outside of this confines, we do not have an attorney-client relationship with you, and that goes for myself and all those guys back there too. And then finally, I ask for your respect and your patience. We are all here trying to learn together. We're doing it with as many people as we can, as many resources as we can, but those are finite at the end of the day. So I ask if it takes a little while to get your stuff notarized, or if it takes a little while to get an answer or a question answered, that you give us as much patience as you can, and know that we are going to help as many people as we can tonight. Okay, any questions before I begin? Beautiful. And I'm glad that took a while, because that means more people are here. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about SB 180. So SB 180, which was basically passed through the Kansas legislature, Governor Kelly vetoed it, and then the legislature supermajority voted to override that veto. SB 180 will be going into effect as of the text of the bill on July 1st of this year. Now, the essence of SB 180, you may have read it already, and I'm sorry if this is redundant, but the text of the bill is essentially defining gender and sex into law in Kansas. So it's giving a definition of sex and gender that applies not just to itself, but to theoretically all laws in Kansas. And it specifically has a provision as well that says that the Office of Vital Statistics and other vital records agencies must comply with that definition of sex and gender. So what we know SB 180 will do, theoretically, what we know that it does, is tell the Office of Vital Statistics and the Department of Revenue, who oversees the DMVs in the state, that Kansas IDs cannot have amended gender markers on them anymore. Or going forward from July 1st, you cannot amend the gender marker on your Kansas ID. Now, if you have amended your ID prior to July 1st, our understanding is that they can't turn that back. So if it's amended by July 1st, you're set. But give me 1 second, please. So starting after July 1st, you will not be able to get that amendment done at that point. Now, there's a tricky point here that folks keep asking me about timing. And that is, if my application gets in on June 30th, and they have it in their hands at the Office of Vital Statistics, but they haven't amended it as of 8 a.m. on July 1, can they amend my birth certificate? And I'm going to be honest with you, we don't know. We don't know whether they're going to grandfather those applications in. So my advice to folks so far has been not just that you should have that application submitted as of July 1, but that you should do everything you can to have it submitted and sent back to you by July 1. Have the amendment actually completed by that date, because we do not know whether they'll grandfather those late stage applications in. There's also any other number of questions that folks have about this bill that I think are extremely, they're rightful questions. There is a possibility that this bill is going to change the way that schools manage having trans kids in the classroom. There's a possibility that it's going to change the way that trans folks have access to public restrooms that align with their gender identity. And there's also the possibility that it's going to affect the way that folks who are employed by the state, so state employees, are able to be recognized as their true gender identity at work. And also, to be totally honest, I want to be 100% with you all. We don't know whether those things will actually be affected or not. Because there's nothing in the bill that says the state has to treat trans kids this way. The state has to treat trans employees this way. Trans folks can't use the bathroom of their choosing. The bill says, theoretically, this is how we're defining it, and state agencies have to comply with that, but there's no more information than that. So for lack of a better word, the states are left up to their own discretion. The state agencies, are left up to their own discretion to decide how they're going to respond to the information in SB 180. So I know that's not helpful, to be honest. I know that is not clear, but that is the best understanding we have of the bill as lawyers who have read it over and over and over again and are trying to figure out what the state might do in response to it. So those questions are outstanding. It may be a patchwork effect where different state agencies, different counties, different municipalities respond to it differently, and we are just waiting to sort of see how it unfolds, and also waiting to see if there are constitutional challenges that may stop the bill from going into effect as of July 1. So that's SB 180. There was a question over here.
Yes. So I was born in California, and it is fairly easy to amend my birth certificate. If I amend my birth certificate and then following the bill going into effect, would I be able to change my gender marker on my license?
That's another very, very good question. So for the folks on Zoom, the question is, if a person is able to change their out-of-state birth certificate and then after July 1 tries to use that birth certificate to change their driver's license, what will happen? I have this factory answer for you. We don't know. Yeah, mostly because to change that driver's license, you have to show an old ID, and that old ID is going to have a conflicting gender marker, which is going to probably out you to the DMV folks. And we think that their response is going to be, well, you don't have two of the same gender markers, so one of these is right, right? We have to abide by one of them under the law. So which one do we abide by under SB 180? The one that aligns with your sex assigned at birth. That is worst case scenario, but I also think it's probably the right answer. And I know that sucks too, but just to be straight up with you. But we have resources today for folks who live in Kansas but were not born in Kansas. So this is for you. Okay, so we're going to get into gender markers. So like I was saying earlier, for folks who are born in Kansas, the portion today about birth certificates is for you because the way that you change your birth certificate gender marker is based on what state you were born in. So if you're born in Kansas, Kansas holds your birth certificate permanently, probably until you're dead, forever, in perpetuity. And you have to abide by Kansas's laws for how to amend that birth certificate. Now, on the other hand, some folks are not born in Kansas but live in Kansas, like our example over here. So you are able to change the gender marker on your driver's license based on where you currently reside. So for the folks who are residents of Kansas, you live in Kansas right now, you will want to listen hard to the driver's license portion of this because we'll explain how you change the gender marker on your IDs. So we'll start with birth certificates. So that was not like super clear, I apologize. This is for folks born in Kansas, and I'm actually going to start with adults. So if you were here with a minor or on behalf of a minor, listen to this because a lot of it's going to apply to you, but know that there's a couple tweaks that we'll discuss right after we get through the adult portion. It's just like slightly tiny little different things. So for birth certificates for adults, the good news is you do not have to go to court to change your gender marker. You do not have to go in front of a judge to change your gender marker. It is a primarily paperwork application that you submit to the state, either in person or by mail. So if you are born in Kansas, I ask that you pull out that packet that we've been talking about and follow along because the information I'm giving you here reflects what's in that packet and we'll actually go through the paperwork itself and give you a chance to sort of look it over and ask any questions you have having looked at it. So there's some essential stuff that you'll need. You'll need a copy front and back of your ID. You'll need a $40 check or money order. You cannot use cash to pay this, but these are just sort of like basic things. And then you need both like an envelope to send this out if you do it by mail, and a return envelope. So an envelope that you send to the Office of Vital Statistics that they will send back to you. And the good news is we have stamps and envelopes here tonight. So if you need a stamp or an envelope, we will send you home with as many as you need. Probably up to 3, just because we have pretty scarce resources. But we will send you home with stamps and envelopes. So the big thing, and the thing that's kind of the big question for folks, is the actual paperwork itself. So the first document we're going to look at is this application to amend a Kansas birth certificate. This is in your packet if you want to open it up and take a look at it with us. So if you see, there's like 4 chunks here, right? We're going to look at the top 3 chunks, and we're not going to worry about the 4th chunk. But I'll start with that top chunk. So this is information about the person requesting the birth certificate. If you are an adult seeking a birth certificate gender marker change in Kansas, you are also the requester, right? Because you're over 18, you have the legal ability to request for yourself, so you are the requester. So the information that you're putting here, the name of requester, that's just you. Today's date, address, city, state, zip, all of that is stuff you should be able to fill out pretty easily. You don't have to do it right now. The big thing that trips folks up is this reason for request. So I'd like everyone to listen carefully who's working on this. The reason for request can be either something as easy as personal reasons, if you want it to be that. That's actually a phrase that Vital Stats has certified to me as being acceptable. Or if you want to be more specific, you can put gender marker change. That works as well. Either one of those 2 is totally acceptable. You should also know that you're not outing yourself to anyone who's not going to find out if you put gender marker change. This is an amendment related to a vital record, which means that as soon as it goes to the state, it becomes a sealed record that is not publicly accessible. So if folks want to look up information about your birth certificate request, they cannot do that It's not like a public record that you can, request through Cora or anything like that. It's sealed. So the folks who are amending the birth certificate will see this and they'll see gender marker change, but this isn't like for anybody to find. And that's the one thing that I hear folks stressed out about the most when filling this out. So after that, email, phone number, signature of requester. You will want to sign this. You do not need to notarize this page. There's another one you'll need to notarize, and that's why we have notaries here tonight, but this one you do not need to notarize, you just sign. And then you'll see that little note there, important, the person requesting the amendment must submit a copy of their ID. So that's that copy front and back of the ID we were talking about. Okay, on to the second chunk of information. So this block on the page is asking for the information that is currently on your birth certificate. I know it has a lot of information on it. This is not to be weird or creepy. It is genuinely because to amend your birth certificate, they have to go back through the millions of records that they have from like the 1780s, and they have to find your one birth certificate. So often if folks have the same name or similar names or were born in the same county on the same day, they have to have multiple points of information to verify that they have the right birth certificate. So they make you fill out this entire piece of information, right? So everything on here needs to be filled out, and it should be about you with the information currently on the birth certificate. That means that under sex, that's the gender marker currently on your birth certificate. So if you have not changed your gender marker yet, then it's the sex that you were assigned at birth that you put down here. Also, if you have changed your name through the courts, but you never changed it on your birth certificate, then it is your birth name that is going to be on here. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Yeah?
Quick question. My child was assigned female at birth, but on the birth certificate, they put male. So what do I do?
I would put male. Yeah, whatever is on the birth certificate currently. Because it's genuinely, they're trying to verify they have the right one. So they want the information on this form to match up with the birth certificate that they pull. Does that make sense? I mean, it doesn't make sense, but like, do you feel like you can go forward with that information? Okay, good. A couple things here that I want to note. There's one thing that trips a lot of people up, and it's unfortunate, but I want to be clear out the gate with it. If you don't have a relationship with your family, and you don't currently have a copy of your birth certificate, that birthplace of mother and birthplace of father, other parent, can be difficult to find. The best way that I have to recommend fixing that problem is if you do have a relationship with your family, ask them. If you have a relationship with family members who may know that information who are not your parents, ask them, like aunts and uncles, cousins who are really into genealogy, we've all got one, your grandparents, anybody who may know that information can supply it. And then worst case scenario, and this is especially easy for you folks living up here in Lawrence, you can go into the Vital Stats office and just request a copy of your birth certificate as it currently is, and you don't have to have this information to do that. They will give you a copy if you provide sufficient ID. So you can get that copy and then use the information you find out from the copy to fill out that information. Yeah?
For my New York birth certificate, it asks for the county. Here it just says birthplace. Do they want the city, the county, the state? What do they want?
That's a good question, and I'm honestly not sure. I had that exact question today. I've been telling folks city and state if you can give it. But if your birth certificate only has state, then just put state. Or frankly, if you think it's going to take too long to get your birth certificate, like get a copy of it back, and then fill this out and then do the amendment, I say it's worth the Hail Mary to just put state on there. Again, there's a lot of not satisfying answers in this presentation, but a good question, Melanie.
What about if the name of the hospital is changed? Do you want it back to the
Put within, like, the right area what's on the birth certificate. So I was born at the Wesley Birthing Center in Wichita. I remember having to get a copy of my birth certificate, and they asked what hospital I was born at, and I just put Wesley Hospital, and they were fine with that, right? So it may be like slightly off, but as long as you're kind of in the right zone, it's going to be okay. Okay, other questions about this one, because I know this one. Oh, I guess these last two. So the bottom two sections here, the number of copies and the total. So for each birth certificate amendment, you have to pay $20 for the actual amendment itself. So for the physical labor of them going into the file, taking it out, putting the stamp on it, whatever. And then $20 per copy of the amended birth certificate that you order. So if you want one copy of your birth certificate, that's $40. And what you would put is number of copies ordered, one, total $40. If you want two copies of your birth certificate, which like a lot of people do, I think two is a pretty common number as well, you would put number of copies ordered, two, total number, $60. Does that make sense? Okay. That trips sometimes vital stats up, so be careful about that one. Because sometimes if you put the wrong amount of money that you're going to pay them, then they'll only give you how many copies you've paid for, that type of thing. Okay, and then this bottom form, don't pay attention to that. You don't need to do that. That's theirs to deal with. Yeah, yeah. So this is, oh, good question. So this is requesting the amendment. So to get a copy of your birth certificate, you don't usually have to do paperwork. You can kind of just go in and show them your IDs and they'll give it to you. But yes, so this is applying to amend it. And I know it's weird. Another thing that folks kind of get tripped up on this is this form, nowhere on this form does it say like what technically what you're amending. It doesn't specifically ask like what gender to what gender marker you're trying to amend. Don't worry about that because that's the next form we're going to look at. And you send them together so they can kind of infer. Yeah. So like I said, you probably, well, if you have a copy of your birth certificate, it'll say it on there. If you don't, like I said, you can ask folks or you can go get a copy. Okay, so the next form you're going to have is this affidavit. So I want you to pull that out. The first thing you should know is that you should not sign this right now because it has to be notarized, which means it has to be signed in front of a notary. We've got 3 notaries here tonight. So before you leave, you can meet with one of us and we'll be kind of set up at a station back there and we can get everybody's affidavits signed and notarized that needs it. So don't sign it. Last time I did this, I forgot to say that until the end, and then everybody signed it, and then we had to get like 40 new copies of the affidavit. So I'm learning my lessons. Just one second, please. So I'm going to go through this one as well. I didn't cut into smaller portions. So this one is exactly what it sounds like. It's very straightforward. You're saying, if you're an adult filling out this for yourself, you're saying I, and then current legal name. So if you've legally changed your name, it's that name. If you have not, it's whatever your legal name is, right? I, current legal name, hereby request that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Office of Vital Stats, amend the sex from blank to blank. And that is where you put what your current gender marker is, and then what the new gender marker is, right? And you can put female, male, you can put FM. They will catch the vibe either way. They're not gonna get like thrown off by seeing an F. They know what that means. Some folks freak out about that too, which I get it. Like it is truly like trying to conjure a magic genie out of a bottle doing this sometimes. So I don't mean to make fun, but I'm just trying to hit the normal questions first. From blank to blank on the birth record of, so this is where it gets interesting. That second name portion, that's the name that's on your birth certificate. So if you kind of logic through this with me, that first one is who you currently are. And then the second one is the birth certificate they're going to be pulling. So if you've changed your legal name, but you haven't changed your birth certificate, then that second name blank is going to be the name currently on your birth certificate, probably the name that you were given at birth. Does that make sense for the most part? Okay. And they have that other form, the application, so if you get that wrong, it's not the end of the world. I have had folks get that wrong and get it figured out before, but just to have your kind of I's dotted and T's crossed. Who was born on birthday in blank county, and then signature, notary, we'll do that later. Yes?
So if you do this and you have changed your legal name, will they like automatically change the name on your birth certificate, or is that like a separate request?
That is a separate request, and that's a good question. So if you have changed your legal name through the court, if you have a court order legal name change, you have that court order, but that does not automatically change the name on your birth certificate. So if you know that you have taken that court order and sent it into Vital Stats before and said, hey, please amend my birth certificate, then your new legal name is going to be on the birth certificate. But if you have not gone through that second process after you went through the court order process, then your name is going to be your old name, probably your birth name or your adopted name if you were adopted at some point. And that is a very good question. I saw another question somewhere. Yeah.
So that's part of my first question. So what should come first? Maybe legal name? So then that should happen with the birth certificate?
Right. So in normal circumstances, I would recommend a legal name change first. In this situation, because we're on a time crunch for the gender marker change, but the legal name change will be possible after July 1, I recommend, does that make sense? Like, exactly. So you're on a time crunch for the gender marker, but not on the name change. So do the gender marker now. It's going to be a bummer because you're going to have to do the amendment twice, but better to be able to do it than not to be able to do it.
Can we do them simultaneously?
Yes, you can do them simultaneously. So if you have a legal name change court order, but you've never done your birth certificate name amendment before, and you're hoping to amend the gender marker on your birth certificate, I'll talk about this in a second, but literally just slap a copy of that court order in with your application that you submit, and they will amend the name as well. So you can do them, yeah, both at the same time. Save yourself some money. That's usually what we have people do, but like I said, we're in emergency room lawyering right now. So this is the affidavit. Do we have any more questions about this one? I feel pretty good about that? Okay. And then the last thing, oh, okay, we're gonna do, oh yeah.
Are M and F the only gender markers for the state of Kansas?
Yes, good question. For the Zoom, I keep forgetting to do this. Are M and F the only gender markers for the state of Kansas? Yes. Kansas does not currently recognize a non-binary or gender neutral or X marker, so you can only go from one to the other. But another question I get a lot, if you're, say, like non-binary trans mask, so you're neither of the poles, you're somewhere in the middle, but you lean harder one way, you can get, like, a non-binary trans mask person can get the M marker, right? As long as you've got the right proof of gender, you can get that M marker, or the other way, you can get the F marker, but there's just no X marker. Yeah.
And I had a question regarding the notary.
Let's put a pin in that if you don't mind. I want to be able to get through this, and I've gone over a couple times, but we can talk about this later. Thank you. Okay, so the last thing, besides the paperwork, besides the proof of stuff you have to, besides like the ID and the check and the envelope and everything, the last thing you need is proof of the gender marker change. So this can take a couple forms, and I'm going to go back to the beginning. So there's a couple ways you can prove this. One is if you have already amended your driver's license or ID to change the gender marker on that, you can send in that amended driver's license, just a copy front and back, to prove what your correct gender is to the state. So you're already sending in a copy front and back of your ID. If that ID has the corrected gender marker on it, that's all you need to send in. You don't need anything else, just that one copy front and back. Also, if you have amended your passport in the past to correct your gender marker on that, then you can send in a copy of just that like face picture page of your passport. Those of you who have passports know what I'm talking about. You can send in a copy of that page of your passport, and they will use the amended gender marker on your passport to change your birth certificate. The last thing, well, also third, theoretically, if you have a court order changing your gender marker, then you can provide that court order. I'm going to add a huge asterisk there, which is that for folks living in Kansas, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to get a court order because Kansas doesn't have like a mechanism by which you can traditionally request a court order for a gender marker change. So that's not going to apply to like 95% of you. But say if you lived in Colorado for a while and you got a court order in Colorado's courts saying that your gender marker should be changed, and you still have a copy of that court order, you can use it to request the amended birth certificate in Kansas. Like I said, probably not going to apply to anyone in this room, but in case you luck into that, great, good for you. That's great. The last thing, and the thing that most folks will use, is the healthcare provider letter. So the kind of final option is to provide a letter to the state from a healthcare or mental health care professional that says it is appropriate to change this person's gender marker. So the A to Z, everything we know about what's required on that letter is in this paragraph here. This is the paragraph that the Office of Vital Statistics uses as their policy for birth certificate amendments, and I'm going to walk through sort of the essential elements of the letter. So it can be a healthcare professional or a mental health professional, meaning that it can be a doctor, it can be a nurse practitioner, it can be a therapist, including licensed social workers. It can be a psychologist, it can be a psychiatrist, anyone who is a licensed professional for whom you were seeing for health or mental health care, that person can write you a letter. They do have to be licensed, though. The state has been very picky about that. Next, this person has to have a doctor-patient relationship with you, so like therapist, patient, whatever, that works too. And they have to say that based on their professional opinion, this is your true gender identity, and they expect that you will continue to identify with that gender for the foreseeable future. And that is all they have to write. You do not have to have undergone HRT, hormone therapy. You do not have to have done surgery. You do not have to have X number of years of healthcare from this professional. They just have to say, based on my professional relationship, this is their gender, and I suspect that that will continue for the future. The one thing that actually is on here that is not on here that's important is that it has to be an original copy of the letter, meaning you can't like copy the letter and then use that scanned copy and send that in. It has to be the actual physical page that your healthcare provider signed themselves. They call that a wet signature. So it has to be a wet signature from your healthcare provider, and they will deny you based on that. We had like a good group of people who were going to the same healthcare provider who was scanning them, and then those were getting denied by the state. So be very careful about that. I will also say, and this is not like calling anybody out, but there are some healthcare providers, am I going to say the name? Planned Parenthood in Kansas City sends email copies often of these letters. So when you request it from that org or another org, if you're doing it by email, tell them, I need the hard copy, I need to pick it up in person. And that should kind of trigger for them that they can't email it to you or scan it to you. And like, God bless Planned Parenthood. I don't mean to be weird, but that's just one that has happened like 10 times to me, so I wanted folks to know just in case. Okay, questions about the healthcare letter? Yeah,
Say you have one that is 3 years old.
you're good.
Okay, cool.
Yep, as long as it's a wet signature. No, you're good. Okay, so I think we've gone through everything here, right? We have application affidavit, proof of gender marker, $40 check, or money order, no cash, copy front and back of your ID, and then a return envelope, which we will give to you as you walk out. So that is the birth certificate amendment for adults. Oh, and I already did that. That means, oh, and then there's 2 ways you can submit it. One way is to mail it to this address, Office of Vital Stats Office, Attention Amendments Unit. That works, but mailing it takes 3 to 4 weeks to process. Because of mail times and because of the way that they receive their mail, it can take 3 to 4 weeks, which means that you would have like a week leeway before July 1st if you mailed it at this point, which is fine. I think you're good. But 1, we're sending a lot of folks to do gender marker changes right now, and we don't know how that's going to delay their processing. And 2, sometimes things get lost in the mail. So, again, I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm not trying to tell you, like, you're not going to get your gender marker change. I'm just trying to give you kind of the real on-the-ground stuff we're seeing right now so that you're making an informed decision. So for folks living in Lawrence, if you can, I recommend submitting your application the other way, or Kansas City, or wherever you're from. Sorry, I should not assume you're all from Lawrence, but for folks living in this region, I recommend submitting it the other way, which is to literally drive it into the Vital Stats office and to hand submit it, because if you submit it in person, they process it same day. You can be in and out in like an hour, although with the number of people I'm sending in person, maybe 3 hours, but you will be in and out in less time than 3 or 4 weeks. And I had somebody do it last week, and they said it literally took them like an hour, 15 minutes. So I strongly recommend, if you can get there during the weekday, if you can take like 2 hours of vacation time or change shifts with somebody, or if you're off school for the summer and you just have some time to kind of like kick around, strongly recommend submitting it in person, because that means that you get it back same day and you have that security of knowing it's done before July 1st. Also, if you are mailing it, I strongly recommend putting Attention Amendments Unit, because that bypasses their mail system and it sends it immediately to the correct office, where if you leave that off, sometimes it gets kicked to the wrong office, and then it takes them an extra week to sort their mail, and that's what makes it be 3 or 4 weeks when it's a really easy amendment. Can you tell I've been doing this for a long time? Because I really know about their mail systems. I had a question in the back. Okay, good. Just the Topeka office, unfortunately. Yeah. It's downtown on Jackson, and it's pretty easy to get in and out of the building. I think, like I said, the weight room is probably going to be the worst part of it. Okay, so for those of you who have been patiently waiting for me to get through the adult stuff, I want to tell you a little bit about the changes that happen when we do this for minors rather than adults. So it's essentially the same process. You can see here that I've literally copy and pasted the information from the adult gender marker change with a couple of caveats. So you have that same application, but on the application, the requester becomes the parent. And if you think about this, like this is not something you have to memorize because you can kind of logic through it, right? People under 18 can't get government documents for themselves. They don't have the legal power to get government documents for themselves. So a parent has to do it on behalf of the child. So that means that the requester becomes a parent. All the other information is the same. Personal reason works fine. The information, like the address, the email, the phone number, that can all be the parent's information. And then the parent signs as the requester here as well. So that's the parent's signature. And then finally, that bottom asterisk, the person submitting the copy of the ID front and back, that's the parent's ID front and back, because like a 14-year-old often won't have an ID, right? So you can kind of logic through this if you forget it when you get to your documents. However, all of the information on this birth information portion is about the kid's birth certificate, because you are pulling and amending the kid's birth certificate. So this is the information they're going to find the correct birth certificate, kids info. And then, what else am I missing? Okay. The next portion is the affidavit. So similar situation, parent's name is requesting, but you're requesting it for the child's birth certificate. So the first name is the parent's name, second name is the kid's name. Parent is signing and having it notarized. And the trick here as well is that if there are two legal parents, even if they split custody, even if like one is a legal parent but has been out of the life for a long time, both parents have to sign and file this affidavit with Office of Vital Stats. One second real quick. There may be complications. This is a situation where I may not be able to answer these questions immediately right now, but this is a really good opportunity for us to talk after the presentation if this is your situation. Because there's a couple kind of roundabouts, but it's very fact specific, and I don't want to make folks like drag their stuff out in front of everybody. If you want to, you're welcome to, but I don't want to make other people do it if they don't want to. So barring that. It depends on what we mean by giving up custody. So let's chat after the presentation, if that's okay. Yes, very good clarification there. Only one parent signs and fills out the application. Both parents sign and notarize affidavits. Because the affidavit is just saying like, I give permission for this. And if you have a minor birth certificate packet, it should have 2 affidavits in it. If it does not, let me know when we've got extra copies, but it should have 2 affidavits. Okay, other questions about minor birth certificates before we keep going? Beautiful, okay, yeah. So if you're on Zoom and you're looking for the forms, you can actually find them on Kansas Legal Services website. So you can Google Kansas birth certificate gender marker, and it'll be the second thing that pops up. And they're linked as PDFs on the web page, and it should be the exact PDF that you have, that the folks in person have. But if you have questions about those, or if there's an error or they don't load or something, yeah, they can reach out to me. Okay, I'm actually making pretty good time, and I'm proud of myself for that. So let's do, oh yeah.
I have a question about the ID.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about a minor that's not having education? Are we putting a horse in front of the cart? Do we need to get that first?
No, so it's the parent's ID for a minor birth certificate. Yeah, it's the parent's ID. And I should say too, it can be an expired ID. It can be, in my experience at least, I don't think they're going to start getting nitpicky about it being an active ID. If your driver's license is expired but you have a passport, I might send the passport instead just in case. But it can be older, it can be you know, if your wrong name, if like your old name is on it and you've changed your name, it can have the old name. If it has a different gender marker, it can have the other gender marker. They're not so picky as long as it sort of like reasonably identifies either the parent or the person submitting the request. So that's, yeah.
Does that include an out-of-date address on it? Just
Yeah, out-of-date address, totally fine. They know people move, they get that. You'll just want to make sure that the address on the application is right, because you don't want them to send it to the wrong address. Okay, so let's talk about driver's licenses a little bit. The first thing I'm going to say here is that driver's licenses are weirder. There's a lot more moving factors in a driver's license than a birth certificate, because your driver's license can have many more statuses than a birth certificate can, right? Birth certificate, it's like you have one, you don't. It's in the state you were born, or you weren't born in that state, right? Like, that's pretty much it. Your driver's license can be suspended, it can be revoked, it can be expired. You can be in that 60-day window between it expiring and it not expiring. It can be, you know, a non-driver ID. There's so many more statuses. So there's two things that are going to become variable here that I just straight up don't have answers for. The first is going to be the exact cost of your personal driver's license amendment. And the second is going to be exactly what IDs you personally have to bring in to get your driver's license corrected. So what I recommend, at least for the IDs portion of this, is that you bring in every document you can. Because you never know. Like, I had mine redone in like September of last year, and I was in my 60-day window, but they like asked me for my birth certificate, and I was like, I don't think you need that. And they were like, we say we do, so we do. So yeah, I'm seeing nods for the people on Zoom. There's a lot of nodding happening. So I recommend just bringing in literally everything you can that's on this list just to be safe, just in case. Especially if you're getting towards the end of June and you don't want to have to make another appointment, you just want to do it in one shot, so you don't have to worry about the deadline. Just bring in everything you can. So, and on cost, every driver's license amendment or reissue that I've seen has been between $25 and $50. So I would say budget up to $50 to get your new ID, knowing that it's probably going to be like $37.82 or something like that. And knowing that that might flex depending on what the status of your license is. But budget up to $50, I think that's fair. I have not seen one go higher than that. So in terms of bringing stuff, there's a couple things that I'm going to recommend just like everybody brings if you can. If you can't bring some of it, you know, do your best. It's probably not going to be the end of the world. You can also call and they can look up the status of your license and they can estimate for you what you're going to need to bring, which can be more effective than talking to me. But I recommend everyone bring proof of lawful presence. This can be a birth certificate, it can be a passport, it can be a certificate report of birth abroad if you're a US citizen born out of the country. It can be a green card, right, like LPR card. Any of those things count. You also need proof of your social security number. For most folks, this is going to be your social security card, but if you don't have a copy of your social security card, you can bring tax documents from your employer, like a 1099 or a W-2, as long as they have your actual full social on them. You also need to bring 2 documentary proofs of your place of residence. So mail from your bank, mail from the government, mail from anyone except junk mail. Junk mail doesn't count. They will not accept junk mail, which is another thing that trips folks up all the time. It can be your lease, your mortgage. It can be like employment documents you've received in the mail, whatever works. You'll also want to bring your most recent driver's license or ID. Here I say Kansas driver's license or ID, but I want to make a caveat that that's not true, and I keep forgetting to correct it. The main thing here is that if your last license or ID is from out of state, say it's a New York license or ID, you have to bring a copy of that with you when you get your new ID from Kansas, or they will not let you get your new ID. The reason for this, just for anyone who's curious, is that if you have your old ID from another state elsewhere, the theory goes that you could use that to commit like some fraud casually. So they make you, I had a client accused of fraud in front of me one time. That's why I say this. So you bring your old one and then they shred it because they won't let you have 2 active or even non-active IDs from 2 different states at the same time. If you have an out-of-state, if your last license was out of state and you don't know where it is, talk to me afterwards. There are things we can do to fix it and you still have time to fix it. It's just going to take a little bit more elbow grease to get that fixed. Yeah.
I have two questions. I don't know if these are relevant, but one of them is, what if you've never had a driver's license or state ID before?
Then that is okay. You're going to have to go through the steps to get your first driver's license or ID. If you get a non-driver ID, you don't have to take the test. But if you're trying to get a driver's license for the first time, they're going to make you take a vision test, a written test, and a driver's test.
Can you get the right gender marker on that, or do you have to get it and then amend it?
You can get the right gender marker as long as you have the proof that we're going to walk through in a little while. But I would recommend, if you think it's going to take you some time to get to the point of being driving ready, yeah, get the non-driver ID, and you can always transfer it to a driver ID after you take those tests. Yeah.
I know you said we're gonna walk through it for a little while, but we have to get both. We just have us get the vital statistics changed first and take that to the ID.
Can I get back to you on that? It's going to make more sense after I go through this. Yeah.
If you're missing your social security card and the information on your tax documents might be like inaccurate as a typo, is there time to get a new copy of your social security card?
I would say yes. I don't know exactly how long it takes, but I will say it's probably cutting it a little bit closer, but I would do it anyway, right? I can't promise you that you will have the full period to do that. I can't promise you it's all going to work out, but I say go for it anyway, because from what I see from clients, social security cards get to you in about a week or two, and at this point you'll have the full month of June after a week or two to get all your other IDs amended. Does that make sense?
And a follow-up question, is there any other proper forms of social security that you could bring other than a tax document?
These are the only ones listed on their website. You might call and ask them, like, is there anything else that they see regularly? But these are the only ones I'm familiar with.
Or would you be able to like get your job to fix the social security number on the tax document?
They might, but they might need a copy of your social security card to do that. I would ask them. I'd call them and ask. But yeah, I don't know.
I was able to go to, so I previously had lost my social security card and I needed to go get that like replaced. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they gave me a temporary like receipt.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
So if you go in person, what they're saying is if you go in person to the Social Security office, they may be able to like print you temp proof of your Social Security number so that you don't have to wait for the card to come in the mail. And that sounds right too. That sounds like it checks based on my experience. It's like a temporary driver's license.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Yeah, you.
So what's been the recommendation for minors for social security? Did I miss that?
What do you mean for minors?
Do we have to change anything, or what do we
Ooh,
report?
let me get to Social Security at the end. Well, no, we can do it right now. We're talking about it. So Social Security and passports are on the federal system, which means first off that they're not affected by SB 180, so you will be able to change both of those after July 1st. The good news is they're both, passports and Social Security are also now on what's called the self-attestation record, or not record, self-attestation rule, which means that you don't have to provide proof of a gender marker change to them to get the gender marker corrected. You genuinely go into the Social Security office and you say, hey, I want to change my kid's, gender marker. And they say, great, which one do you want? And you tell them, and they go, great, here's a new Social Security record. And that's all. Yeah, passports too. So if you get a passport for the first time or you get a new passport, literally all you do now is circle the gender on the form that you want. I'm not kidding. No, I know, it's ridiculous, but you circle the right one and you shoot it out.
It's basically how I'm able to change my birth certificate for California.
Cool, yeah.
They make it so that you self-attest and it's
Yeah, easy.
cool.
Yeah.
Just,
So there is no form if I do need proof.
Yes, for Social Security, there is no form.
You can do that a day before you go in.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think there's, if you want to mail it in, I'm sure there's a form online, but to be honest, I recommend everyone go in person to Social Security offices to amend that stuff, because otherwise you have to send them the original copies of like your driver's license and your birth certificate, and in the mail. Yeah, I know, it's as sketchy as it sounds. So I do not recommend that if you can avoid it.
I'll also say, if somebody had to just recently do it, if you're going to bring for your name change, bring a certified copy, that means a court copy that's signed by the court. You can't just bring a copy that's printed off that you have, has to be a
Thank you, Cass. Good point. Certified copies, you can get those from the courthouse. Usually the clerk's office will give those to you. I also recommend if you're outside of Douglas County and you got your name changed in another county, call the clerk's office and ask them how they prefer to give folks certified copies. I've practiced in 32 counties in Kansas, and every time I've called the clerk to ask how to request a copy, they've been like, God bless you. Because people just come in and yell at us and we don't know how to fix it. And if they call us, we can tell them how to do it easier. So strongly recommend calling and chatting with people. Okay, so like I said, most recent driver's license or ID, your checkbook, card, or money order, the DMV does take credit cards and debit cards and cash. So no need to go out of your way to get a money order. Folks do that sometimes, and you know, you can spare yourself a couple hours by using your credit card. And then the last thing is the proof of the gender marker change. And this is where stuff gets slightly more interesting. It's like a little bit funkier with driver's licenses, so I ask that you bear with me, because it's going to be good, but it's a little bit more interesting. So I ask if this applies to you, that you pay a lot of attention to what I'm about to do. So the first one is really, really easy. It's if you have a birth certificate that's gender marker has already been corrected, you bring in that birth certificate. And you can show the DMV that birth certificate to prove the gender marker change on your driver's license. Now, we had a question earlier about the timing of, do you do the birth certificate first? Do you do the driver's license first? What order do you go in? So in normal times, when we're not doing triage care, I recommend that folks do the birth certificate first, because if you're born in Kansas, it's a pretty simple process. And then you take that birth certificate into the DMV and you say, this is my new gender marker. However, right now, I am recommending that folks try to do both as quickly as possible, and often that does not mean waiting for the birth certificate. I'm about to explain how you can do that, but I'm not recommending right now do birth certificate, wait for that to come back, and then do driver's license, unless you can go in person, right? So if you can go in person and get that birth certificate done, like Friday of this week, you've got a whole week to do the driver's license, and there's no delay on the driver's license either, because you could go physically into the DMV to get that amended. So if you can do the birth certificate very, very quickly, yes, do birth certificate first, then driver's license. But if you have to mail in your birth certificate amendment, I recommend that you do that, and at the same time, do this other thing I'm about to recommend. That's where the chart comes in. So amended birth certificate. You can also bring in a court order for a gender marker change. I mentioned this earlier. I said that this was not likely to apply to most folks in the room. If you have another state's court order that says your gender marker was changed, you can bring that into the DMV as proof to change your gender marker as well. Subpoint like 2B here is passports. So I have heard conflicting stories on whether you can bring in a passport with the corrected gender marker to prove a driver's license gender marker change. The policy does not list passports as one of the authorized documents. So the text of their policy does not say you can do that. But some folks have successfully gone to the DMV and, like, frankly, just kind of like talked the DMV people into it. Which is like, if for anyone who's like an older trans person in here, you know that that's how you used to do it, right? Like in 2003, you used to go into the DMV and be like, do I look like a woman? And they'd be like, no, and then they'd fix it for you, and then they'd send you home. And that is true story. I had one of my earlier presentations, the guy was like, I did that, which really made me feel much better about saying it. But so that's the old school way to do it. You might succeed if you already have a passport that's been amended and you have a lot of gumption. I don't know that I recommend it, because it's not for sure. They may get mad at you, and it also is outing yourself sort of, you know, at your own comfort level. So like I said, if you're feeling up to it, go ahead, no promises, but some people have succeeded, some have not. And then the last thing is what we're calling the Hail Mary. I hope, Legal Aid, are you okay with me calling it the Hail Mary? So I'm calling this the Hail Mary because I don't know how else to explain it. So there's one last way that you can use a healthcare provider's letter to get authorization to change the gender marker on your driver's license. So I'm going to step over here to talk about birth certificates. On the birth certificate one, you just gave them the healthcare letter itself, right? That's not what we're doing here. You can't just do the healthcare letter alone. So the Hail Mary is the driver's license situation, right? It's different, where you have to go through extra steps after you get the healthcare letter. to get authorization to change the driver's license gender. So there's 3 letters involved in this process. First, you get a letter from a healthcare provider, just like the one we talked about with the birth certificate. It can be healthcare, it can be mental health care, it can be a licensed social worker. You don't have to prove hormone therapy, you don't have to prove surgery, you don't have to prove number of years being seen by this person. You just have to have a healthcare letter that's been signed, and it has to have a wet signature as well. So you can get the same letter, but note, you cannot just copy the first letter, right? You have to get 2 original copies, originally signed, of the same letter. Does that make sense? So we did a clinic with M-Care. Basically, they would just print 2 of the same, and then the healthcare provider would have to hand sign both of them. So you get your healthcare letter, that's letter number 1. Second, you write your own letter to the Office of Driver Solutions requesting that they give you permission to change the gender marker on your driver's license. So those of you with packets for Kansas driver's licenses, this is the last page in that packet. And I'll ask you to turn to that real quick so we can look at it together. So we have written a template letter with all the information that you have to give Driver Solutions requesting that driver's license gender marker amendment. There's a bunch of personal stuff on it. It's like address, date of birth, I think county of birth or something like that. I have all the right information in there. I don't have it on the top of my head. But you fill out this form letter, and then you take that healthcare letter and you send them in together to the Driver Solutions office. And you'll see that the address for the Driver Solutions office is at the top of the template letter at the back of your packet. For those of you looking at your packet, do you see that, the address at the top? And you just address it to Driver Solutions, you put that exact address on there, and you put those 2 letters together and you mail them in, right? What they will give you, unfortunately, is a 3rd letter, which is as annoying as it sounds. So you send those in, they disappear. You don't get those back. They keep those. They will send you a 3rd letter from their office that says, hey, we got your letters. We are granting you permission to change the gender marker on your driver's license. Take this 3rd letter in, number 3, to the DMV, and it will act as your proof of gender marker change. So it acts in lieu of your passport or your birth certificate or your court order, right? That becomes kind of your magic ticket into a gender marker change. So you have to do those first 2 yourself, mail it in, you'll receive the 3rd one. In terms of timing on this, I'm hearing that people are getting their 3rd letter back in like 2 to 3 weeks, so pretty quickly. Plenty of time for you to get it done before July 1st. And this is kind of what is leading me to that complicated answer to your question of which one do you do first, right? If you can go in person to Vital Stats to do the birth certificate, easy peasy, you can use the birth certificate for your driver's license. But if you have to mail it in at this point in the process, just to be realistic, you've got 6 weeks, and we're looking at a process that in a good period takes 4 weeks. So there is no promise that that birth certificate is going to come back by July 1, and especially there's no promise that it's going to come back by June 26th, which gives you time with your schedule to get in the DMV by July 1 to use it to change your driver's license. Does that make sense? So I'm recommending right now that folks who are born in Kansas and live in Kansas both send in their birth certificate amendment and send in the Hail Mary letters. Because at least this way you are gaming the system when it comes to timing. If your birth certificate comes back first, excellent, beautiful. Use that to change your driver's license. If it does not, if there is a delay there, and that driver's solutions letter comes back to you first, excellent, great. Then at least you've got your driver's license gender marker changed, right? I know it's more paperwork. I know it's more administrative nonsense. I know that I'm very cognizant of the fact that I am further confusing you by telling you to do both of these things. But when I tell you that I have thought this out and that I think that this is in your best interest to try to do both if both of these apply to you, I mean that very seriously. And that's also why I'm doing like 7 of these, so that if you need to come back again later, we can talk about it later, right? I can kind of help out again. So, yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, it's not under forms. It should be under just Kansas driver's license gender marker change. And there's a PDF link on that webpage And I can send this out to you all after the presentation's done, so you can link it in the Zoom. But it's if you Google Kansas driver's license gender marker change, the exact packet and the same template letter at the last page in the packet will be available to folks. So that also goes for you all. If you lose this, if you keep your windows down on the beautiful drive home tonight and it flies out the window, it is on the website for you in this exact form, very accessible. So, and if you lose it, I have my cards back there and I will email it to you. I have a no frustration policy with sending as many people the link as many times as I have to through this period. So that brings me just really quickly, we're doing a couple more of these events. Again, like if you have questions that come up later, right? If you have a weird interaction with Vital Stats, if you frankly just forget part of this and you want to hear it again or you want to talk to us again, we have 4 more events coming up that will make this possible for folks. Tomorrow, I am doing a virtual event. The link is on Facebook. It's on the Facebook event. If you Google Gender Marker Change Clinic Kansas, it'll show up. I've already tried. So it's virtual, it's on Zoom, and I'm doing the exact same presentation. So if you wanted more different information, you will not be getting it. But if you wanted the same information, you will be getting it. Next, on Friday, May 19th at 1 p.m., my friend Lara Crow will be doing an in-person event in Garden City at the Great Plains Makerspace. So if you have friends in Western Kansas who may want to go to this in person, she will be there. She's also done a ton of these and knows her stuff really well. Next Thursday, May 25th, I'll be doing another virtual event. Same thing, link on Facebook. Pretty straightforward stuff. But that'll be kind of like my last opportunity to talk with folks about this and to get the information out for the first time. So if you have last minute questions, I do recommend you coming to this event because I'm literally just going to sit on the Zoom until everyone's questions are done. And at that point, I may stop doing events because the timing is cutting it pretty short. We're worried about doing them too late and giving people false hope with the timing. And then finally, my friend Lara Crow is going to be here at Lawrence Pride on June 3rd. That's also going to be her last appearance. She will have a table at Lawrence Pride, and she will be doing one-on-one consultations going over people's paperwork. So if none of these other things work, but you want to talk to somebody again, Lara will be available then. So that's kind of the scheme of things right now. I will also be tweeting, not to be like linked to my SoundCloud, but I will be tweeting about this a lot. So all of these events will be on my Twitter if you want to look me up. I'm on Twitter. And if any new events will also show up on Twitter as well. So with that, I think we are ready for Q&A and then attorney consultation. Cool. Let's start over here. Oh, good question. Yes. So the template letter for the gender marker, the driver's license Hail Mary, there's a line about you having already changed your legal name. This was just because I created it for folks who had, and then forgot to take it out, to be honest, and printed like 100 copies of it. So if you have not changed your legal name, if that doesn't apply to you, you can just mark through that. Just don't fill it in. It's going to be okay. They will catch the drift. But sorry about that. Yeah, you can still use the same piece of paper and everything. Oh, the driver's license forms. Okay, so we are out of the driver's license forms. If anybody needs them, like I said, they're online and we can look up the link together later. Thank you, David. Yeah. Yep, if you've got it with you, totally. Or you can go print it at the library and bring it in. Cool. Yeah. Good question. So for folks on Zoom, the question is whether you can hand in the Hail Mary letter to Driver Solutions in person. My understanding is no. My understanding is you have to mail that one in, but they're getting back really quickly. I just had someone get one back today that I think they put it in like 10 days ago. So, yeah. Let's meet after this real quick. I'm going to do like a second round of it for folks who might have questions. Yeah. Yeah, and this is another good question that I want the crowd to hear. So the question is, for a person who doesn't have a driver's license yet or an ID, not even like a okay. So for a person who doesn't have any like state issued ID yet, if they change the birth certificate before July 1st, but they're not going to get that ID until after July 1st, is that ID, new ID, going to have the correct gender on it? So I will say my answer on this has been tentatively yes, but not certain. So our best guess is that even if the DMV wanted to apply the like transphobic definition of gender to the new driver's license, they probably wouldn't have enough information to tell them to do so based off that amended birth certificate. Because you only have to bring in, social security card doesn't have your gender on it. The only thing you're bringing in that has a gender on it is the birth certificate, and that says the correct updated gender. And then, the only thing they would have to go off to tell them that they may have been assigned a different sex at birth would be the amended, because when you amend a birth certificate, it does leave a stamp on it that says amended on it. But you get that same amended stamp if you say adopt, if a person is adopted and their last name is changed through the adoption and they change that in the birth certificate, that same name shows, that same amendment mark shows up. So we're thinking yes, not 100% sure. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so born in Missouri, living in Kansas right now. So you'd want to follow the Missouri birth certificate law. Missouri is not barring gender marker changes, but the Missouri like law for amending a gender marker is way harder to prove up. You have to have usually a court order that says that you have gone through gender confirmation surgery. And it doesn't really matter which one, but it has to say gender confirmation surgery. So that can be harder. I do know some folks who do that though, so we can talk if you would like to. Yeah. Yes. I recommend that. And it's not for, like, theoretically, it might be easier for you to do birth certificate and then driver's license. But with the timing here, I recommend that Hail Mary letter combo on your driver's license for you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. As long as there's no, like, crazy wait, like, crazy delay, they may say, we're closing the office, it's 5 o'clock, come back in tomorrow and we'll put you at the top of the list. But my guess is that it's not going to be that much of a wait that you would have to come back in the next day. And even if you do have to go back in the next day, they would give you the birth certificate that day when you leave. And that's me being like really catastrophic about how many people are going to be there. I really don't think it'll be that bad, but I mean, David and I were talking earlier. Worst case scenario is what we're doing right now.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
My mic was dead over here, but let's have folks ask their questions into the microphone just so folks on Zoom can hear it too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good question.
So if anyone has a question, I'm happy to walk over to you.
Any more questions? Yeah. Oh,
Wait, let me
Yeah,
let me
let
come
Mark
back
come
there
to you.
just so folks on Zoom can hear too.
Right, it's going to be slightly less relevant for the folks on Zoom, but you said you cover about notaries later. Do you have notaries here tonight that can notarize things for people?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we have 3 notaries. So if we don't have many more questions, I guess I should say kind of like last call-ish for questions, we'll still have attorneys going around. What we're going to do is have y'all start working on your paperwork. And then there's a bunch of lawyers and law students in the back of the room who are going to be loitering around, helping you. Is that, sorry. Just sort of haunting the room.
I've got you.
Yes, lawyers and law students, would you like to raise your hands, please? Thank you. So those are our beautiful volunteers. What we're going to do is have them kind of available. So if, as you're filling out your paperwork, you've got a question, you're not sure how to fill out a certain thing, or you just want to go over it again, you all can raise your hands, and then one of the attorneys can come to you and help you with your paperwork. And then there will be 3 of us notaries at the back of the room. So if you feel like you're ready to go, you're either going to do your paperwork at home or you finished it here, then you can come get your affidavit notarized and you can head out.
So we got one more in-person question, and then I have a couple questions on Zoom for you as well.
Perfect.
I know my question is like really specific, but I have a court date for my legal name change on June 18th. And I was ideally hoping to get my name change and gender marker change on the birth certificate at the same time, then change my driver's license at the same time. I know that won't leave me enough time to do all that. Would you recommend going ahead and doing the Hail Mary option to get the gender marker changed first on my driver's license, then change it again with the court
Sure.
order?
So what I'm going to recommend is basically the same as everyone who's born and living in Kansas. Submit your birth certificate gender marker application. Also submit the Hail Mary documents. And then go to your name change. And hopefully by June 18th, either the birth certificate will be back, and then you can use that to change your driver's license, or the driver's license letter will be back. But after June 18th, you'll be able to go to the DMV and get both changed. You will have to go back and change the name on your birth certificate, so you'll have to do a second amendment on the birth certificate, but I think that puts you in probably the safest position. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. I know, and I will say the other thing I'm sorry about, I'm telling all of you that you're going to have to spend $40 twice, and I know that's a huge bummer, but I think it's for the better than having no chance to spend $40 and get correct documents. Okay,
And then I have one question on Zoom for
Beautiful.
you. I think it relates to gender markers on birth certificates, but the person asked, for those of us who have consular reports of birth abroad with a processing time of 4 to 8 weeks and no expedited options for processing, what is our best option?
yes, so this is such a good question. This, if any of you are born outside of the US but were born as US citizens, this applies to you. Otherwise, work on your paperwork because it's not going to apply to you. But a consular report of birth abroad is essentially a US birth certificate issued to someone who was born on US territory abroad, like Guam or like a military base anywhere abroad. They don't get birth certificates, they get CRBAs. So the good news is that SB 180 is not going to affect CRBAs. So you will still be able to change your name and your gender marker on your CRBA after July 1st. But if you were living in Kansas with a CRBA that you have not been able to amend the gender marker on, then I recommend doing the driver's license Hail Mary option, where you send in a letter requesting permission to change the gender marker, and then you can do the CRBA process in your meantime. But yeah, you're probably not going to be able to do the CRBA and then the driver's license at this point.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And then someone asked, I feel like this is just good information for everyone to know, but wait. Someone asked if the Lawrence Public Library usually has a notary public available, and does it cost anything? So we'll notarize anything for you free of charge, and we usually have a notary on staff almost every day of the week, but it's safe.
7 days a week, all open hours.
7 days a week, all open hours. You're free to call to see if we have someone in, but almost every day there's someone here. Yeah, so I just figured folks should know about that.
Ooh, okay. Well, with that then, I'm going to let folks get to their paperwork. Raise your hand